What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, Tom Aspinall, what can you say? Such an incredible performance, such a fun fight while it lasted. Aspinall versus Pavlovich, when that got announced for the interim belt, we all knew somebody was getting knocked out.
Right.
We didn't know just how quickly and just how exciting that fight would be. So I want to touch on the X's and O's of the fight, and then we'll get into why I think this should have just been for the undisputed belt rather than for the interim belt, and where things could shake out with Stipe and Jon. But first, we got to give credit where credit's due. These guys came to fight, they delivered, and Tom Aspinall is no joke.
Not at all. And he should feel like the undisputed champ of the world. I mean, to go in there and beat a guy like Pavlovich and the way that he did it was just incredible. And I love that these guys kind of got the memo for the rest of the entire UFC card up there at MSG. Everybody's getting finishes. Everybody's TKOing or KOing people. It's just an electric night from start to finish, star-studded event. And these guys, you know, even though there's so much on the line, and generally when you have a title on the line or you're a number one contendership, you get very calculated performances, and a lot of fighters don't go in there not to win their fight, but to not lose their fight. And
Right.
sometimes these fights that seem like they're just going to be the most amazing things, or they're matchmaking heaven, they're just like the perfect situation, end up being duds because these guys go in there not to win their fights, but just to not lose. And these guys just threw all that out the window, went in there, and with both of them having really high KO and finish rates, we knew somebody was going to go down. I'm glad that they came in with their skills and their original game plans like they always come in with. I was really impressed by Tom Aspinall, but Sergei Pavlovich had some moments in there in that short fight that we saw as well. So for Tom to deal with some adversity, to show us a little bit of defense, and then, of course, show us the incredible offense that he's got. I said it before the fight, Tom Aspinall's speed is a real problem. Of course, everybody at heavyweight has tons of power, and anything can happen with one strike at heavyweight. But when you start to incorporate a speed advantage at that weight class, you can really start to find something special. And although that 265 is the weight cap for heavyweight, I tend to believe somewhere between 235 and about 250 is the sweet spot for the heavyweight division.
Yeah, it certainly history would show that. You know,
Yeah.
Stipe Miocic, Cain Velasquez, all those guys were sort of in that 240 to 250 range.
Right.
And Tom seems to be the next generation of ultra-talented heavyweights. Like you said, he moves like somebody who's in a much lighter weight class.
Right.
But he also possesses the power of somebody who weighs 265 pounds or even more.
For sure.
And it's amazing to see somebody with that type of footwork, that type of spatial awareness, understanding of striking, and in the very little time that fight actually went on, Tom showed us a lot.
Yeah.
And I think he has the potential, and I know this may be getting ahead of myself, and he is only an interim champion as it sits now, but I think Aspinall could be an all-time great heavyweight.
I
You know,
agree.
right now we pretty much all agree Stipe Miocic is the best heavyweight of all time. He did not get the belt till he was in his mid-30s.
Right.
Tom Aspinall just turned 30, which is a baby for the 265-pound weight class.
sure.
We know that people in that weight category in light heavyweight don't even come into their primes generally until they're like 33, 34, and then that can extend all the way to late, 37, 38, even up to 40. So to see Tom Aspinall this good, this early on, and this technical with 100% finish rate, the sky's the limit. And he showed us not only, as you said, great offensive calculated striking, good footwork, good ins and outs, but also a hell of a chin because, as you mentioned, Sergei Pavlovich definitely had his moments in that fight. He's a big, strong guy. I mean, he has put down the likes of Derek Lewis, Tai Tuivasa. I mean, some of the biggest sluggers the heavyweight division has ever seen have been put down by Sergei Pavlovich. Tom Aspinall ate those shots, answered them, and got his hand raised. What can you say? Such an amazing job.
Yeah, he looked really good. And Sergey, he's such a big body in there, but what people don't realize is his reach is like that of Jon Jones.
Yeah.
He's got really long arms. And as soon as I saw that, of course I've seen both of these guys fight many times, but you forget about those types of statistics until they get up there and then the tail of the tape shows up or Bruce Buffer's announcing everything. And you're like, oh my God, Sergei Pavlovich has like a 8-inch reach or whatever it was on Aspinall. That might be something he's going to have to deal with. And of course, when you're dealing with somebody who's a little bit longer than you and rangy and knows how to use their range, you have to be more mobile with your feet and you have to be really good at getting in and getting out. And Tom Aspinall's footwork and his speed really did cater to that. And I think if he wasn't such an athletic guy and such a good mover, he would have had trouble with Sergei Pavlovich. But I know American football isn't very big over in the UK, but I think if Tom Aspinall would have grown up in America, he would have found himself maybe not in combat sports, but in something like an American football, and he probably would have done pretty well at that size. You see how he's just an agile guy. He doesn't carry a ton of excess weight. Of course, all the heavyweights, they're not shredded up like the 125ers. Think of like TJ Dillashaw when he showed up at 35 and stuff. You're never going to see a heavyweight look like that, but he doesn't carry a ton of fat, and that makes for a really effective body type and skill set. And I believe the speed is really the secret sauce to Tom Aspinall. I know I said that a couple times in the last video, already a couple times in this video, but I think if he's got a speed advantage on pretty much everybody in the heavyweight division, which as the landscape sits right now, he does, he's going to be able to get these guys out of there with that precise striking that he's got. And I love also that he's able to mix up his striking so well. The first shot of the night was a low calf kick, right? And it looked good. He turned Pavlovich around, right? A guy that looks like a small building is getting twisted around like a ballerina after the very first kick of the night. And so Tom Aspinall's got a lot of power. He's very creative with his striking, and man, the sky's the limit for this guy. As soon as he gets in there with Jon Jones and we see exactly how he stands against Jon, we're going to know whether he's going to be the heavyweight GOAT, and it's not even a question, or if there's some other people that can hang with him. But I'm sort of leaning after last night towards that he's going to give Jon Jones everything he can handle and might actually get his hand raised.
Well, yeah, and that kind of brings us to the elephant in the room that we have to discuss. And in my opinion, Stipe Miocic versus Jon Jones after last night makes the anti-sense. There is absolutely no reason to have that fight. Not only was Stipe in the crowd, and this is coming from somebody who's a Stipe fan. I grew up watching Stipe from the early days before he had the belt when I first got into the sport.
Right.
I'm as big of a Stipe Miocic fan as you'll find. However, Stipe is on the wrong side of 40. He really doesn't compete anymore unless it's a big name and there's a reason behind why he should compete. And fair play to him. I mean, he's earned the right to do that. But when you look at the fact that he's in the crowd, he's dressed up, he's in the front row, you have this big moment. You also know that Jon Jones is nowhere to be found because he's going to be gone for at least 8 months recovering from that pec injury, and then he has to get back to training after that, then get prepared for a camp. So we could be looking at almost a year before we see Jon Jones back in the cage.
Right.
What they should have done is brought Stipe into the cage and said, hey, look, you and Stipe are going to slug it out for the undisputed belt, and the winner of that will have business with Jon Jones when he's ready to come back.
Right.
But they didn't do that, which tells me the UFC kind of feels like Aspinall is the guy right now, but then what do you do with Stipe when Jon's ready? Because he's kind of odd man out, and this could be like a Colby Covington situation where you have an interim champ who everybody wants. I mean, after that, I don't think there's anybody in the MMA community that would rather see Stipe Miocic versus Jon Jones last night after that performance than to see Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones. The fight's way more competitive. It makes way more sense at this juncture. And I think it's going to be a miss if the UFC comes back and says, look, yeah, we're still doing Stipe versus Jon for the undisputed, and then Aspinall is going to have the interim belt, and we'll see what shakes after that, because Stipe and Jon have also both told us that that's their retirement fight. So what are you going to do, strap an undisputed belt on somebody, and then 30 seconds later on the microphone with Joe Rogan, they're going to, whether it's Stipe or Jon, probably Jon, likely Jon, definitely Jon.
Right, yeah, exactly.
He's gonna retire, and then what? Then does that interim belt that Aspinall has just becomes the undisputed belt? To me, it doesn't make any sense. They need to do Aspinall Jones. That's the fight. That's what we want to see, and that's the most competitive fight that the UFC could make right now at heavyweight.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Stipe Miocic is retiring after his next fight, regardless of when that is, or if it's not against Jon Jones, I believe he has already retired.
Right,
but Stipe Miocic had the opportunity last night to get in that cage. There's very few people in that entire MSG sold-out arena that are able to walk into the cage after a fight, and especially after a title fight.
He's one of them.
And he's one of them. And there's a very short list of them. And most of them are employed by the UFC. But I think Stipe Miocic missed an opportunity in inserting himself last night. If he would have been able to get in there and got a face-off against Tom Aspinall, that could have done really good things. Of course, a microphone would have wound up in front of his face, and they could have said, look, Tom Aspinall looks really good tonight. To get a guy like Sergei out of there fast is very impressive, and I'm the heavyweight GOAT. I think we should forget about this light heavyweight named Jon Jones who's only spent about a minute at heavyweight. Let's forget about him. He's injured. He doesn't want to fight, and he said he's retiring after his next one. Push that all to the side. get Stipe in there with Tom Aspinall, but I don't, Stipe's not that guy. And
Right.
of course, Tom Aspinall didn't go out and call for it either, which I think would have been a really smart move on Tom's part, because Stipe Miocic is a fighter, just like everybody else. And while I don't believe he wants to fight anybody that's not Jon Jones, if you call him out, if you back him up into a corner, he's going to come out fighting. And if Tom would have pointed all of his cannons right at Stipe Miocic, said, I'm coming for you, forget about this light heavyweight that's only, fought Cyril Gahn and it wasn't even competitive, whatever. I want to fight you, and I want to retire you and all this stuff. And he would have gone a little bit heel. Stipe would have taken the bait and probably would have got in there. They would have had a great face-off and sort of pushed Jon Jones out of the way. But of course, that's not going to happen, and that's not what you end up seeing. I think Tom Aspinall was just relishing in the moment. And even though it was an interim title, it sure felt like the undisputed title.
Right.
There was a huge aura, and MSG is so special already. But that entire event just was making all the fights that came after the next one feel even more special, because everything about that venue, about the card, about the matchmaking, about everything that was at stake last night just lived up to the hype. And Tom Aspinall deserved to get an undisputed belt last night, but I don't think anybody's really looking at him as like a B-level champion. I think everybody sees him as the best heavyweight on the planet right now. And with Jon Jones inactive, I think that they need to get this guy active, and they need to give Tom Aspinall a fight as soon as possible. And if that's against Stipe Miocic, then I believe it'll be easy work for Tom Aspinall, and then maybe he can wait around and see what happens with Jon Jones. But aside from two good guys turning heel and me not getting my way and wanting to see that happen, it was an amazing night for the UFC.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, too. Stipe was ready for a fight last night. He was prepared. It wasn't him that pulled out. It was Jon.
Right.
And then Tom, yeah, he did eat a couple of shots from Sergei, but it's not something where he's got to take 6 months off before his next fight.
Right.
So you've got two guys that could theoretically fight Q1 of 2024, and Jon Jones, who's on ice till at least Q3 of 2024. So the matchmaking is weird. The schedules don't really line up. I think that they should have made it for the undisputed belt. I know I'm beating a dead horse here. They did not do that, and I don't want to tarnish the actual fight itself, because it was truthfully one of the best cards that we've had all year.
Right.
Some of the most electrifying KOs that we've seen in a long time. That one certainly being one of them. Anytime you can put a guy like Pavlovich down, that's something to write home about.
Right.
So congratulations to Tom Aspinall. I just feel like his night was just ever so slightly diminished by the fact that it wasn't for the undisputed.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't like to harp on the heavyweights. They're big guys. They deserve a lot of time to recover. But it is the slowest moving division in the UFC. And Tom Aspinall is a hot commodity right now. And the heavyweight division is always the most coveted division. It's the most prestigious belt that you can possibly get in all of combat sports. And he's fresh. He's ready to go. I say we move on with this thing. Don't put this guy on ice until, sometime late next year and not get any sort of motion taking place at the top of heavyweight division. That would be a missed opportunity by the UFC. I really see them getting him active and just moving on. And we'll see Stipe and Jon square off at some point, or we won't. Whatever. The sport moves on. Tom Aspinall's the king.
Yes, sir.